Welcome everybody to PinstripeChronicles. I am Tats. I am here with Rob and Donald, and lockout still looms. We don't know what's going on. We got bigger bases. We got maybe more teams in the playoffs. Baseball is just continuing to just push itself further and further out of popularity. And the biggest question that's
a bit negative. I mean, let's
it is negative because I'm tired of sitting here wondering when things are going to happen. So yeah, I'm being negative. Everybody's gonna have to deal with it.
You might get some good news today.
What's the good news?
Well, it's possible that the CBA might be resolved today.
Maybe. It was we were hopeful.
There's optimism.
3 weeks ago. We were hopeful 2 weeks ago. We were hopeful last week. We're running out of hope.
Well, it's just let's give our viewers a little bit of hope. I mean, it seems to be that there's some traction. So I thought we maybe discuss the traction here in the movement towards the right direction. For instance, they're getting kind of closer on the competitive balance tax. They're increasing that a little bit, so it looks like they're kind of meeting in the middle. And what I like is that Steve Cohen, credit to him, he's not going to have any issue with the fact that I believe they want a fourth tier of tax penalties for the upper payroll teams, which will be the Dodgers and the Mets. And Steve Cohen was like, listen, if that's for the greater good of baseball, and he doesn't have a problem with it. So, you know what do you guys think of Steve Cohen's attitude towards that? I quite like that. It was great.
That's respectable. I just don't like him, but you got to respect what he's doing. He's saying, I got the money, I'm going to spend it. You want to tax me, go ahead and tax me. That's basically what he's saying.
Yeah.
And I wish that most big market, I mean, let's be honest, it's only going to affect two teams right now. That fourth tier, which is the Dodgers and Mets. The Yankees would be approaching that if they operated the same way they did, a decade ago with the way they were spending. They'd be in that tier as well. But it just shows that kind of wish most owners in the big markets would have that same mindset. Like, I can afford to sign these players and pay the tax, so I'm going to do it. Steve Cohen knows the Mets need to start winning, and he's got the money to field that kind of a team because he knows if you win in New York, you're going to make money hand over fist. So it's respectable. It's respectable what he's doing.
New York will explode, regardless of which team wins first. And it's going to be all over the place. And baseball is just really damaging itself, and it hurts because it's such a game. When you're into a sport, you're into it, and you're seeing we're always trying to figure out how to MLB wants to bring in new fans. If they can't recognize the game that we're trying to introduce them to because of all these little change, there's so many little changes that it's still you're starting to affect the structure of the game and the purity of it. Now they want to make the bases bigger. They want to
okay.
They want to with the expanded playoffs. I know other teams have the same percentage of other leagues. They have the same percentage of teams that are in there. But with baseball, it doesn't work. You can't have a system set up so if you're under 500, you can go to the playoffs. That's unacceptable to me.
Well, there's too many games. That's something that we've already said. If you're going to expand the playoffs, they need to shorten the season. The reason why it works in basketball is because it's half of the MLB season length. So you can have that many teams because it's still, even though there's, so many teams in it, there's still the play-in tournament. It still kind of feels like there's a mad dash for those last four teams or so to get in there, where in baseball, you're having half the league make it. There are going to be some bad teams that make the playoffs. So that's why I don't like it. I was able to live with if they extended it by 2 extra teams in total, but now I think it's like 4 more teams are making it. So literally it's half the league making the playoffs, and you're going to see some bad teams. So But if that's what it takes to give us baseball, I'm for it. Let's be honest. This offer the MLB put out yesterday is the best one we've seen, and we're probably gonna see for quite some time. And I'm hoping they accept it. I'm sure the players are going to have a little counter proposal. Hopefully, it's something they can both say, okay, enough is enough. Let's get this done with. Because if we get another week of canceled games, we're going to have to wait for them to meet again a week from now. It's just going to be another headache. So I want to look at this with some positive thought, because I feel like this time there's more optimism because the league's offer wasn't bad. The previous one last week was terrible. But when they said it's this one or we're getting canceled games, it was awful. This one is a lot better. And I'm thinking the players are going to have some small changes to it, but they seem to be they're willing to agree to the expanded playoffs and the bigger bases and maybe the international draft as well. So that might be the hiccup. The international draft could be the hiccup here. So we'll see if they do something with that. But I think this might be the end of it within the next 24 hours, maybe 48. Who knows? I'm hoping it's over because, like you said,
the international draft seems to be a stepping point in negotiations right now because I believe the agents don't want it, and that's going to be an issue to work out, because let's look at it one way. That's where the Yankees like to spend their money. That's where they like to go and use their financial advantage to go and get the best international prospects. And that's where we've benefited significantly. If it turned into a draft system, obviously that changes certain advantages that maybe the Yankees, for instance, would have, because they have really good international scouts and are able to just go get the best ones because they got the financial advantage. So I'd be interested to see how that changes things. And obviously, with the fact that it would go into a draft system, I assume that it wouldn't exactly be a bidding war. So the agents aren't going to like that because obviously they're not going to get as much money for their clients. So that could be a sticking point.
Well, the problem with the international, the process, and we've talked about it before, I think it was last offseason, we talked about it a little more in depth, is you have these players that are making, the league minimum. I don't want to say, minimum, when you're making $700,000 a year, it's hard to say, use the word minimal. But, they're on the low end of the payroll. We'll put it that way. They're on the low end of the payroll, just waiting for that opportunity to get their big contract. And then the teams are saying that they don't have the money to spend in the budget. Meanwhile, they'll go out and they'll spend $5 million. They'll have a $5 million post for an international player that may or may not even come. You're paying to almost just to meet with them. You have to pay something. So it's a flawed system because you can't tell that the kids coming out of college that there's money to be had, just not for you.
Yeah, the whole signing bonus thing is certainly something you have to look at. When it comes to the Japanese players, the posting fee goes to the team. It doesn't go to the player.
Yeah.
So like when we paid the $20 million for Tanaka, that went to the Golden Eagles, I believe, and then we negotiated with Tanaka and gave him that crazy contract, which worked out for us because he was great. But that's one of those cases where it does work out. Ichiro is another. Otani, a lot of the times they will work out. But
Matsuzaka,
again,
right?
it's kind of a question mark. Yeah, Matsuzaka. Keigawa was a perfect example for us of something. It just doesn't work. So, it's a gamble, but I kind of like the way it is now, probably because I'm biased, because that's the only time we have the getting these great young players.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess if this is what it takes to get this lockout to end, then whatever they agree to, I'm going to be like, good, I'm for it. I don't know what the bigger bases are supposed to do in terms of adding excitement, as they put it the other day, but it's mainly for player safety.
Yeah.
bases get wet, there's like a big X on the new base that allow the water to kind of just trickle off of it, so you won't be seeing players slip. That's basically it's for the player safety.
They could have done that with the base. They could have just redesigned the bases at the same size. They didn't have to make they didn't have to triple them and double them in size.
I don't have a massive issue with the bases. I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, obviously, there's other things like.
Well, you know what bothers me more? What really got me the most with the bases is the fact that they, with everything else that they're arguing about, let's just throw something else in the mix for everybody to dispute about. Like baseball doesn't have enough problems. It's like they keep getting in their way, creating obstacles, and for everybody, more things for people to bicker about.
But they have to introduce this because you can't just throw them a curveball for no reason. Like this is all part of the negotiations. So they obviously want to introduce things like banning the shift, or at least amending the shift situation, and they obviously want to improve the quality of the viewing product, because we've all discussed how broken the viewing product is, because in the analytics era, it's all going the opposite way, and now it's a very difficult game to watch now. It's not terribly enjoyable to watch for somebody that isn't a diehard baseball fan. If you're diehard baseball fans like us, then you go, right, I don't really like this stuff, but we're going to write it because we're committed. That's fine. But someone who's maybe just kind of being introduced to the games and be like, this is going on for 4.5 hours, and this is not a very good, fun game to watch because there's 4 people in the outfield. Why is there 4 people standing in the outfield? There should be 3, right? So that these kind of things need to be brought up in CBA negotiations. You can't just go, oh, by the way, guys, we're just going to introduce this next year without prior discussion. That's why they're bringing it up. They're not trying to be awkward. I actually agree that they need to do something with the shift, so I don't have a problem with it.
No, that should be up to the rules committee, not that. Same thing with the intentional walk. That wasn't a CBA thing. That they just decided one off season. We're going to try and go just putting up your hand and not throwing the ball 4 more times. So you can't pick and choose when you could amend the rules and when to bring them up.
Well, they can actually, because this is what they're doing right now.
No, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's annoying is basically the right word for it, because they could easily be like, let's get the main stuff done, right? And then once they have an agreement in place, they all right, we can agree, we can try to work on stuff with the shift. Here's the thing with the shift. Is it really that bad though? Because you're trying to give your team the best position to make it out, right? So
yeah,
it's just like the NFL, like, hey, we know this team likes to run the ball, so we're gonna load up on run defense for the game. We know Joey Gallo pulls the ball to the right side of the infield like every time. Let's load up the right side so we can get him out. I don't see why that's such a big deal. I don't like it necessarily, because as a Yankee fan, I've seen Teixeira get killed by the shift. We've seen McCann get killed by the shift, and so on and so forth. So I get why players don't like it, but it's not the worst thing when you think about it in terms of they're just doing what it takes to win. We have your scouting report. You hit it to the right side. Ortiz was a pull hitter, so you shade them over to the right side, get them out. You can limit it, sure. If you move your infield over, you can't. Maybe if you move your infield over, you have to stay like that the whole inning. So teams are going to be like, maybe we shouldn't do this, because if a switch hitter comes up, or a guy that can go opposite field comes up, then now you have the entire left side open. I don't know how they're going to ban it necessarily.
I don't think they can ban it. They need to adjust it where there's limits of where you can be positioned.
Yeah,
you can't have the third baseman playing in right field. You know what I mean? No. It's the extreme shifts that's ruining the game. It's like you said, when you have 8 players all on one side of the field, that's just stupid.
You can't have 2 people standing in the outfield. I don't think. And you're also trying to get balls in play. And as you're right about analytics is designed to help you win. And obviously the way that these extreme shifts are working, I mean, it absolutely works. Joey Gallo's average is like 130. It would probably be about 60 points higher if there wasn't an extreme shift. He maybe be batting 210 as opposed to 130. But it's all about optics, though, because you want balls in play. It's all about baseball. What's more exciting? Balls being put in play. You want action on the base paths. You want balls to be put in play. You want these kind of things to happen. And we're not getting that right now because we're only getting the 3 true outcomes. And that has to change. I mean, we were all brought up with a style of baseball which is now completely removed and it's antiquated. And it's really hard to get your head around it, because if you're going to sit and watch for 4 hours, people striking out and walking with 1 or 2 home runs, I mean, that's not good for getting new fans involved in the sport. You don't want to watch that. I wouldn't want to watch that. If I was just starting baseball now, would I want to watch that? No, absolutely not. So they need to do something.
Well, that's why banning the shift will increase the offense, which is fine. A lot of these, the football's constantly amending their rules, to make it, the offensive game easier and more exciting, and more exciting. I don't want to say easier because it is all a game. To do that in baseball doesn't work, because then you're gonna have, then we're gonna be, we're gonna be bitching and moaning that Cole's got a 5 ERA, or whoever, and we just gave these pitchers are getting these big contracts. The shift is part of that's their stat protection, and now if we want to take that away, that doesn't help them either. So now we're going to be screaming that the defense sucks because all the balls are getting through the infield because they're all they're where they're supposed to be. So it's a no-win argument.
You adjust.
Yeah, it's going to be an adjustment. Our defense wasn't that good as it is anyway, so I don't know how many runs we prevented, but it's the thing with the shift that's probably like the biggest question mark I have. I understand the basis part. I just didn't like how they worded it with adding excitement to the game. That doesn't add excitement to the game. Adding excitement to the game means just go back to admit you had juice baseballs and go back to it. That adds excitement to the game because you were seeing a bunch of runs and you were still seeing good pitching. The really, really good pitchers were still able to get you out.
Well, that's what it is. Put the juice balls back, give the pitcher a spider attack, get rid of the rosin bag. We're good to go.
Yeah, just let it be an all-out war.
That's it.
The only time it was obvious was in the London series and the Field of Dreams.
Yeah.
They did something with that baseball because you can hear it. It's like that
doesn't. There was a very different crack of the bat in that game.
That is not real baseball. That did not feel.
That was not a way to promote that kid at this point.
No.
Right. So I mean, just what adds excitement to a game that has been historically, if we're being honest, when you think you bring it to a new person, you go, yeah, you throw the ball, you hit it, it might go over the wall, it might be an out. It sounds boring, if you're gonna be like, or you can play basketball where you have 10 guys running up and down the court, you're shooting into the net, you got blocks, you got stealing. That sounds more appealing to a newcomer to sports, right? So does football, so does soccer, to be honest. It's more about the diehards. How do you add excitement to baseball? Because you really can't change much about the sport. It's always been pitch and try to hit it, and then you get the guy out any way you can. That's basically how it is. And football has been the same way too. You try to score, but they've implemented, there wasn't always the forward pass. That became a thing over the years. And then teams have been able to figure out trick plays and stuff like that. In basketball, the 3-point shot became very popular. You even had to move back the line, and things like that. So how can you innovate baseball? How do you change the game? Because you really can't.
Well, that's why that's the premise of part of my argument is baseball is that one sport that these adjustments don't help. It may make it a little more exciting, but it doesn't help the growth of the game. Kids these days, especially in, low income areas, you might not, it's easier to get a kid just, a basketball that they could just, bounce around, or a single football to, to have a catch with your friend. With baseball, you need a lot of equipment.
Oh yeah.
And it ain't, certain gloves for certain bases, especially once they get into leagues. That's when the price goes really up.
And you need a whole bunch of people to make it like any kind of a spectacle. You can't just be you and your buddy doing a pickup game, apart from throwing and catching. That's about all you can do.
Yeah, with basketball, you could hang out with your friend. It could be just two of you. You could have a pickup game. With football, there could be three of you. You have offense, defense, and a quarterback. Baseball, you need the whole freaking neighborhood.
That's a great point.
So maybe it's not the size of the bases. Maybe it's not the shift. Maybe there's too many players on the field.
Maybe they need to just stop trying to change a game that doesn't really need changing. Because look at it. Baseball was exciting. And it was the same game. It was exciting in the 90s and the early 2000s. People were watching it, and people still watch baseball. It's not like it all of a sudden doesn't get any eyes. People are still watching it. So,
but when did baseball in the last decade, or actually even more, in the last 20 years, when was baseball the most popular?
The 90s, they're in steroid era.
The home run era.
90s and
huge balls. That's when.
But also the 70s. It was big in the 70s and 80s too. With the Miracle Mets and.
But it was.
And then the Yankees in the 70s.
Sports had a different outlook.
Billy Martin and Reggie Jackson and stuff like that in the 70s. So you had that kind of excitement. 80s, you had the Miracle Mets. Well, everybody loved that. They're all on coke. It was crazy. It was psychotic, and they were a crazy team. And then the 90s, it was all. During 1994, baseball was done because of the lockout. They canceled the World Series. It stopped the Montreal Expos, who had a hell of a team back then, the Blue Jays, who had a heck of a team back then, and it stopped the Yankees, who was the best Yankees team since like the 70s in 94. And then that was stopped because they looked certain to be the American League representative. And obviously it stopped Don Mattingly, for instance, getting a playoff run. So it was a terrible time for baseball. And then after that lockout, I was listening to Buster Olney. Buster Olney was saying that after that, the Montreal Expos never survived. The money that they lost.
Yeah, they didn't recover.
Yeah, they never recovered it. And it took them years. And it took the Blue Jays like 20 years to financially recover from the damage of that lockout in 94. So what the Yankees World Series in 96 did, and what the steroid home run chase did in 98 did, it saved baseball. It completely saved baseball. And then from that on, then you carried it right through the noughties, and you had Barry Bonds, and you had people that were tuning in to watch these incredible monster sluggers hitting home runs that are still landing, and that's what drew a lot of eyes to baseball. But then for my personal opinion, is that Moneyball, this new Moneyball era, has changed the way the game is now played, and obviously even the playing field, because you want now teams like the Oakland A's and stuff like that, and the Tampa Bay Rays and things like that, competing with the big guys like the Yankees, right? But how do they do that? And they found little ways in which to do it, and that's with analytics and with Moneyball nonsense and stuff like that. And from there on, baseball started to get really difficult to watch because of this analytics stuff. It's not a fun game to watch. I'm being honest. It isn't a fun game to watch. And I'm not being overly negative. It isn't a fun game to watch unless you are committed, lifelong fan like we all are. But I think for a neutral, it isn't a fun game to watch. So that's what's happened. I think it was the Moneyball era which has changed the way baseball is, because in the 90s and 90s, it wasn't really a big deal. It was more like just hitting the ball, pitching well, and it was fun. You had Roger Clemens pitching 8 innings. You had guys that were awesome pitchers pitching 8-9 innings. You're not allowed to see that now. We're getting getting relievers started. We don't even know which guys are going to start one day to the next. That's a problem. You know, there's a whole bunch of problems. And a lot of it is because this Moneyball era and the analytics, and you got guys that are faceless. This is my final point. You got guys that are faceless. You got people in running the organization that aren't accountable to anything other than their computer. And then they are always right because the computer tells them what to do. And then that's now been filtered down to managers. Now you've not got fun managers anymore. Instead of having like Bobby Cox and Tony La Russa, Tony La Russa is a bad example. He's still going, but he's an outlier. But you've got old school managers that are forced out of the ball game, out of the game, and now you've got middle managers like Aaron Boone, who just goes, okay, and then that's it. And there's not really any fun strategy going on mid-game because it's all come from up top 24 hours before the game started. So all of these things are real problems in the game of baseball, and I really started with the analytics era.
No, you're right. I'm pro analytics when it comes to finding hidden gems, and it really, really works for the lower market teams, you know, because look, the Rays aren't going to spend like the Dodgers and the Yankees. So they have to find cheap alternatives and like, hey, you know, the stats and the numbers suggest this guy could be had for a certain price and he can give us production. The Rays have been doing it for the last, 7 years, whatever it is. So obviously it's working. Doesn't necessarily work for Oakland because they haven't really gone anywhere. Tampa Bay's at least been to the World Series. The issue with it is the big market teams are trying to do the same thing to save money, you know, and you can do both, you know, because you can use analytics and you can sign a player for cheap, but then you can also be like, well, we're also the New York Yankees. So we can get Carlos Correa. I'm just going to use him as an example because I really want the guy on the team, but you know what I'm saying? Like you can do both when you're a big market team, but the issue is now you have so many teams that are like, hey, it's working for them. Maybe we don't have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to field a good team. But if you can do it because, again, winning's going to bring you the money at the end of the day. You know, Tampa Bay, even though it's working for them, they're fielding a good team year after year. They still don't sell out. You know, so it doesn't necessarily bring in fans when you don't really know the players, right? Like Tampa Bay's got some really good players, but do they have a superstar that's going to draw people to come to the dome or that thing they call a stadium? No. Take it from someone who's in the area, or relatively close to the area. They don't sell out. You know, you need a superstar. You need those are why the teams that sell out are the teams that have the deep pockets. You know, you see a lot of stadiums, like, you know, there are some dedicated fans, trust me, around even for some bad teams. People still go watch the Pirates, but when they're winning, the stadium's full. Yep. When they're losing, it's not so full. It's just a fact, you know. That's what it's like for the lower market teams or whatever.
I'm glad you brought up that point because there's owners which are just absolutely intent on not spending, and that actually goes beyond just analytics. So I'm glad you actually brought that point up because the way that the current system is run is almost incentivizes losing. The Baltimore Orioles are like, well, we don't really have a chance of competing anyway, so what's the point spending it all? So we're just not going to spend it all. And then we get top draft picks, and it doesn't really matter. And that's what we're doing. And that's something that the CBA needs to fix. And I believe that with a new draft lottery, that might help. Because the moment, there are low-income teams like the Pirates and the Orioles who are like, hey, we're not going to compete. I'm not quite happy with that, so we're not going to spend at all. And that is a huge problem.
I think the draft lottery is a step in the right direction for that. It's gonna, but that's another thing. We're not going to see the results of how the competitive balance shifts. I think it's going to take 8 or more years, for it to all balance out across all of the teams. We might see a couple of teams where it affects right away, but these owners that don't want to spend, because they don't want, they say that they don't have the funds like the Yankees and the Dodgers made, or the Mets now have. Then usually, Tampa's the perfect example of what those teams can do. And rather than invest in the players right away, invest in the analytics. The Pirates are an example. Look what the Marlins just put that organization through. They had the superstar, but they couldn't get anybody in the seat. Because when you only have one person to play, why would I go buy a ticket to a game where that superstar may be getting his off day because they already played 3 games in a row? So the rest days need to be handled a lot better. There's a lot of things inside the game that they can work on that will close the gaps on some of the arguments and debates amongst the owners, players, and fans. Because we're in this triangle right now where nobody, it's like that meme you see from the Office a lot, where they're all pulling their the bigger guns and just trying, yeah, exactly. That's where this game is at right now. Nobody trusts anybody, and somebody's looking to pull the trigger first to say that I won.
Right. That's a good point. And that's really what this whole CBA has been. It's just one side trying to one up the other. No, you're the enemy. No, they're the bad guys. No, look what they did. No, you locked us out. Well, you gave us this. In the end of the day, they're both at the fault here. And if the players decline this offer, then it's going to get a lot of people starting to side with the MLB, which is probably the worst nightmare for the Players Association. There is an update just from a few moments ago from Nightingale, our best friend. Let me just give him some credit because he's been killing it during this whole thing. He's really kind of redeemed himself a little bit. But he said the international draft is the last big remaining obstacle. So we were right on that regard. So virtual high five for us. And he said the MLB badly seeks it and will eliminate all qualifying offers for free agents in return, but the union is still opposed as it receives input from players, former players, and agents. So the Players Association doesn't want it for obvious reasons. The MLB wants it, and they're willing to get rid of the qualifying offer, which is stupid to begin with, in order to get it. So if this is what keeps us from getting an agreement today, then I think all baseball fans need to unite and say, F everyone, because you're all at fault. This is a stupid thing to hold up what could be a really, really important 2-week period in MLB history. If they end this thing today, and then let's say by the start of next week, players can start signing and we start knowing when teams are going to report, it's going to be crazy. And baseball is going to be in the news, which right now the only news in baseball has been negative. Okay, look at us. We haven't really had much to talk about. We've been very negative for the last 3 months. We want to have something to talk about. Baseball needs to get this done today. Get this done. Get the players signed. Get the players in camp. Get the season going.
The reason why I believe that they come to the table now was because of fan pressure, because they blamed the owners super fast. For them setting up that awful offer before, which was pretty derisory offer, saying that's our final offer, and it being rejected out of hand, and then them having to go public and say, oh, we're going to cancel games. The universal court of opinion went against the owners, and the owners knew that was a terrible look for them, right? Because they're like, hey, we want bums and seats ASAP. So then they came to the table with this much better offer. They've moved so much higher and in terms of luxury tax, it's much closer to what the union want. And now it's kind of the ball's in their court now. So if they reject it, then you have to say that you can't really say it's all the owners. I don't really believe it's all the owners anyway. But so that's a big thing, man. I completely agree.
No, I think they're both at fault. And with the way, with this last offer, I think it now puts the pressure on the players to say, okay, we're let's just get this going. Enough is enough. Our career, now, our season is further in jeopardy. So let's just bite the bullet, and get back on the field.
I just hope it's not a 14 playoff. I hope it's 12. I hope they settle on 12. I mean, listen, 12 is too much anyway, but I hope they settle on 12 because 14 with ghost wins and things like that, it made no sense to me. My head was exploding just reading it.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? It makes no sense.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. It's just dumb.
Yeah.
And you know what it is? Because it all comes down to the TV money. It doesn't. They're not doing it for the competition. They're doing it for the paycheck.
Right.
And they think that we're stupid. We're trying to say, they want to make it, the playoffs more entertaining. No, you want to entertain the networks.
Well, I'm glad that was a really good segue because just today that they've announced a new deal with Apple to start showing games every Friday. It's going to be streamed on Apple TV. What do you guys think of that?
Perfect timing, right? MLB gets this big deal, and now they're like, let's give the players a really good offer. So we need this signed because we just got this big TV deal. Look, it's all about money. It's what we said from day one. It's all going to come down to the money. That's really how life works anyway. Everything's about money at the end of the day. So it's no different here when you're trying to run a business.
No, I don't think the Apple deal is a big deal. Last year they had, teams had to deal with Amazon to stream so many games. So YouTube has made deals with teams to stream games. So with Apple, they're just the next guy. They're the next streaming service in line to get a little piece of the pie.
How does it affect things like the Yes Network locally and or local streaming? How does that affect?
I don't think it affects it. I really don't. It didn't affect them with all the other streaming services. Why would this one be different?
Well, I mean, if it's exclusive, these games are going to be only broadcast on Apple TV. So for like those Friday night primetime games, they're just trying to get more eyes on the product by calling it primetime baseball. Because right now, all you really have is the Sunday night game on ESPN, and ESPN broadcast sucks. I don't know how many people are actually watching it, but I don't know, if you get a good announce team in there and you bring some good insight, not just people complaining about the way the game is played now. Just get people that want to talk about baseball while baseball is being played. How many times we hear that during the playoffs where they were just complaining the whole time during like the World Series? I don't like how the game is being played. Well, that's fair. You don't have to like it, but just call the game. That's going to draw people away.
But don't you think that this deal, but don't you think this deal kind of once again makes baseball look like a niche sport? Because the NFL is on Channel 5, Fox 5, CBS television, right? Anybody can watch the NFL. But baseball is more pushing towards things like Apple and Amazon and things like that just to generate money. So you have to have these subscription services just to have it. And then they've got all these blackout restrictions for local games anyway. So for some reason, people in Europe or people in Africa or Australia can watch all 162 Yankee games, no problem, on MLB television. But certain people in New York who are going to games whenever they want can't watch all 162 games. What sense does that make? So
no, I can't watch all.
Baseball is turning into a niche sport, and you have to pay extra money. Yes Network costs a fortune. We'll just have a certain cable package just to get the Yes Network. Yep. And then, it's turning into a niche kind of a thing, whereas everybody can watch the NFL. And that is a huge issue for me because every sport should be accessible to everyone. I know in an ideal world that would be the case, but other sports are a lot more accessible. Why is baseball trying to make themselves more niche?
Yeah, even the NBA and the NHL are more accessible on TV than the MLB. That should have been one of the better focal points for having, for the CBA is these stupid blackout restrictions. I live in New York, and there are times like why would I buy the MLB package? Why would I buy MLB TV if I can't watch 95% of the games? Why would I give you my money for that?
That's true. And it was the same way even way back when I had like a cable package. I had the Yes Network, just not when the games are playing. So I couldn't watch the games, but I could watch everything else on the Yes Network. Just let me watch the games. That brings so many more eyes to people in like Idaho or something. Like, oh, look, I got the Yes Network on here. I can watch the Yankees play. Maybe I'll start getting into baseball. Just a simple example like that. I couldn't watch them in Florida. So it's like that everywhere else. You can only watch the Yes Network in New York, if you have the cable package. Just let people watch the game. Just let people watch no matter where you are. If you have that channel, you can watch it. How many teams use Bally Sports now? And it's probably only accessible they're in the area that they're in. The blackout thing is stupid. Just let people watch the sport. It doesn't matter where you are. If you want to watch the freaking Twins play the Blue Jays, you should be able to watch them no matter where you are in the country.
Yeah.
Or
there's certain instances where you're local and you can't watch the game, but if you were living in Pittsburgh and watching the Yankee game, you can. But there's people in New York that can't.
Yeah,
I mean that just makes zero.
That's
sense.
what it is. That's why they got to change. They got to change the system. That should have been one of the first things that was addressed. Because they could put so much more money in their pockets if they made all the games more accessible.
Yeah.
But you're also taking away from the Yes Network. So they're limit. They kind of put themselves in this corner where the fans can't win. Because they're still getting their money from the networks, whether it's MLB TV, Apple now, yes, SNY, and all the other networks specific for their team. And it's making it the more they keep expanding all these areas, areas to watch, or stations to watch, the less accessible it's becoming. Not everybody has a subscription to every streaming service. So why are you making it? Like Donald, that was an excellent point on your end. It's less accessible because how many people actually subscribe to Apple TV? As opposed to have Fox.
On Amazon, I don't have Apple.
Or how many people can turn on NBC, ABC, or Fox, or UPN, So that's why football continues to be king.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, I have the Yahoo Sports app, and when football's going, I get the local game. Whatever's showing locally on CBS or Fox I'm able to watch on my phone for free. I don't have to pay a dime for it. I can watch it on my phone. Every playoff game I could watch on the app. I watched the Super Bowl on the phone. Like it was there. Because it was on TV, where I feel like I couldn't do that with baseball. I couldn't just turn on my MLB TV app and be like, they should give that out for free. Let's be honest here. When it's playoff time, just let people watch it. Because
well, how many times? Yeah, and also how many times do you see tweeted out? What station the game is on? People are trying to find the game.
Yeah, it's My 9. Yes.
Yeah. Pix 11. Like if the Super Bowl is being shown free on a Yahoo Sports app, why can't I watch game 1 of the ALDS for free on MLB TV? Let's be honest here. What's going to get more eyes, the Super Bowl or a first round playoff game in the MLB?
Well, that's why MLB needs to do like what they did in 2016 when the Cubs made it to the World Series. Give free access to the MLB network during the playoffs. You want to get people into your sport? Give them free access to the channel during the playoff run. Or even if you want to do it just for the World Series. But make it accessible for everybody, not just the people that could afford all these different apps. Because unless baseball hasn't been paying attention because they're so busy and focused on getting this deal done, the world is in a recession right now. Prices are going through the roof everywhere. let's add to everybody's expenses by adding, having our games on a streaming service that now more people have to subscribe to. And spend, and they're not going to have the same. I don't think the viewership is going to go, high enough to justify it.
No.
You know what the owners really should do is they also just come collectively and say we're going to lower ticket prices 5-10% for this year after the CBA problems and stuff like that, and after all the stuff you guys went through during the coronavirus, we're lowering it collectively 5-10%, whatever you agree on, because you need bums in seats, you need people to go into the stadiums. That's how it's going to increase revenue for the teams in order to be able to spend on the product. But again, there's certain teams that just don't want to spend at all, and that's where this increasing the luxury tax isn't going to affect small market teams spending more. You need a salary floor in order to convince teams to actually spend more than they need to. Just having a Steve Cohen tax or a Dodgers tax is what it's going to be. That only really affects the top 5-10% teams of baseball. It doesn't affect the middle class or lower class of baseball. You know what I mean? So I really don't see much is actually going to really change. And my final point I want to bring up was listening to Buster Olney when he was on with Dave Rothenberg. He was saying that the people that's going to be most affected by this is actually going to be the middle class, the middle tier free agent, the Jock Petersons, the Schwarbers, whatever, the dudes that are going to be in the 10 million range, right? That are about 30, that aren't going to command top salary because they're not driving in 50 home runs or whatever. You know what I mean? Batting 350. The guys that are just very good, solid free agents, they're going to be priced out because there's going to have to be, what his point was, there's going to have to be a pinch at some point because the owners are like, well, if I'm going to spend more on these young guys, that are arbitration eligible, you have to increase their salaries, right? And then you're still going to have to pay the top guys even more, possibly even more money. Who's going to be affected? There are people right in the middle. So it's going to be the 30-year-old free agents that are going to not get the salaries they deserve, and they're going to be priced out. Yeah. And that's what's going to be affected because the owners are going to be pissed that they're having to spend more than they need to. So that's how future baseball is going to be.
Yeah,
middle tier free agent.
Yeah, we'll get into that tomorrow on how, as the contract, once the contract is ratified, what's going to, how it's going to affect going into spring training, the free agent frenzy, and we'll get into more detail with that tomorrow, and because that deserves a lot more attention, and we got to sign off here. So just remember, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Check us out on sportnarium.com/player. Northeast Streaming Sports on Roku, and as always here on YouTube. So enjoy your day, wear your pinstripes with pride, and play hard.